Hi, One Hour Smart Home here, and today we're going to show you how to install a Wemo dimmer. So we got the Wemo dimmer over here, we've got our light switch that we're going to replace, and the first thing that you want to do before you work on any electrical system is go and turn off the power at the circuit breaker and confirm that the power is off. So we've already done that. This light bulb is no longer on, this switch no longer has power to it because we turned it off at the circuit breaker, and if we want to be extra safe, we can check with a non-contact voltage meter. So we're not getting a reading here. We know that the power is off. So we're going to go ahead and get started removing this outer plate from this light switch so that we can install the Wemo light switch. Once we've got the power confirmed off, we're just going to go ahead and remove these two screws. Now, if you've got a non-contact voltage meter, it's a good idea to check again to make sure that that power is off to the light switch before you go any further. We'll put a link to a non-contact voltage meter below if you want to be extra safe when doing this. Now, all we're going to do is remove these two screws here. We didn't get a reading on the non-contact voltage meter, so we're ready to install that Wemo switch. Now we can pull forward on the existing switch to expose the wiring and see what we're working with. So I just open it up here and now I'm able to see the wiring and work on the switch and wiring a little bit better. Now it's a good idea before you go any further to make sure that you take a couple pictures of the wiring in your junction box so you know how that is wired and you're going to be able to put it back together well if you've got any issues. One important thing to note with the Wemo dimmer switch is that the Wemo dimmer does require a neutral wire. So this red wire over here, that is our load wire. That's the wire that will go up to the light fixture. We've got our line wire, that is the incoming hot wire or incoming power wire. We've got our white wire, this is the neutral wire. So the Wemo dimmer does require a neutral wire, and that's important to note. Most houses built after 1980 are going to have a neutral wire, but if you've got a house built before 1980, it's kind of hit or miss if you will have one in there. You're just going to have to check in your junction box to see if you have one. And then the last wire we have is this green ground wire. So we go ahead and look in the wiring here, and I'm just going to pull some of these wires out so we can get a better visual of what's going on in there. And I can see I do have a white neutral wire right here. So I will be able to install the Wemo dimmer switch because I do have a white neutral wire inside the switch box. So we're good to go there. Now I'm going to remove the two wires on the existing switch, and I recommend you mark these with some electrical tape so that you know which one is which. Typically the load wire is going to be the top wire on the switch, and the hot wire, the incoming power, is going to be the bottom lug on the switch. Now that can differ because in an old style switch it didn't really matter which one was hot and which one was the load wire. Now the way that you can tell which one is hot and which one is the load wire is the load wire should be the wire that is going to the light fixture and the hot wire is incoming power. Now, if you're having difficulty determining which wire is the hot wire and which one is the load wire, what you can do is use a multimeter and take a reading of this. But in order to do that, you're going to have to restore power temporarily while the switch is out of the box so that you can take a reading. If you plan to do this, you need to be incredibly careful because you are working with hot wires and you could get yourself shocked or electrocuted. So take all the safety precautions, make sure that you're not going to have anything that's going to touch these terminals or short out, and make sure everything is safe in the box. So in order to take this measurement, we're going to have to go back to the circuit breaker and turn the power on, and then we can determine which one is the hot and which one is the load wire. So if you are going to do this, be incredibly careful, and you should be a qualified person who knows what they're doing before working on electrical systems. So you can see that we restored power to the box, and now we're going to take a reading to see which one is the hot and which one is the load wire. So I've turned my multimeter here over to AC voltage, so we should get a reading somewhere around 110 to 120 volts when we touch the hot terminal and the load terminal. So I can see that I'm getting about 110 volts. So that means that we have electricity flowing through there. Now I can determine which one is the hot and which one is the load by making sure the switch is off and then touching one terminal here and then the other one to ground. So I see that I do this and there's essentially no reading there. There's 1 volt. So I know that this is the load wire going up to the light fixture because there is no power currently on this terminal. So I touch it to ground and we see that we are at 0. Now the next thing we're going to do to determine which one is hot is touch one terminal to the hot terminal and the other one to ground. So now we put one terminal on the other one and we put the other terminal on the ground wire. And we can see we're getting a reading of about 120 volts there, so that we have power. And we know that this is the hot terminal because this is incoming power, and that this is the load terminal because when the light switch is off, we don't have any energy flowing through here. So once again, you identify the load terminal with the switch off, and we see we get basically a no power reading or less than 1 volt here. Once we go down to the hot terminal, you can identify that by touching one wire to the ground wire and the other one to the hot terminal, and we can see here that we get 125 volts. So now that we know which wire is which, we should mark them appropriately and we can start wiring up our Wemo dimmer switch. Make sure that you turn the power back off at the circuit breaker, use your non-contact voltage meter, and let's see if we get any kind of readings here. We do not, so we know this is safe and we are ready to go. Now, let's say that you don't have a multimeter, but you do have a non-contact voltage meter. Typically, you are going to be able to use this to determine which one is the hot wire and which one is the load wire. So typically, the hot wire will have a higher reading than the load wire. You want to make sure, once again, that the switch is off, and then I'm just going to show you. So we're going to go over to the hot terminal here, and you can see we get 3 or 4 when we touch it right up there next to that terminal. And then when we take it away and we go up here to the load terminal, we only get 1. And that's because we're probably getting a little bit of interference from this terminal down here. But once we turn this light switch on, you could see that we would get power. So you need to make sure that you take this measurement with the light switch off. And we can also identify that this top terminal is the load wire because that reading is much lower than what we get from that hot terminal with incoming power. Now, since we know which wire is which, we're going to mark them, and we need to turn off the power at the circuit breaker again before we start working on this. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. So before you start working again, you wanna make sure the power is off. So we're gonna take our non-contact voltage meter here and check to make sure that there is no power to these wires, and we see there isn't, and that the light switch is no longer on. So now we know that it's safe to start working on this. We know that the top wire is our load wire and the bottom wire is the hot wire, so now we're ready to remove these. Now we remove the ground wire and ground screw. So in order to wire the Wemo switch, we're also going to need to connect to the neutral wire. So we're going to need to get that wire out here and accessible so that we can wire to it. So I reach in here, move some of the wires around, and I go for the neutral wire right there. Now we're ready to connect the Wemo light switch. So I'm just going to go ahead and connect the neutral wire first. You can do this in any order that you want to, but I'm just going to remove this wire nut and then connect the white neutral wire to the white neutral wires in the switch box. Now wire nuts are sized differently and color coded per size. So each wire nut has a specific rating for how many wires can go in each color. So for this, since we're going to connect 4 white wires and this is 14 gauge wire, we're going to use a red wire nut because that's going to secure them better than this yellow wire nut, which might be a very tight fit with the wires. Now we've got all 4 of our neutral wires together, and we're going to take our red wire nut and secure them. You want to make sure that all those wires are pushed down deep into the connector and you twist, and that all of these wires have contact together and that they are all covered by the wire connector and wire nut so that there's no points of contact where they could short out inside the switch box. So we can feel them start to twist together and that they are all secured in there. And you want to give it a little bit of a pull to make sure that you've got these properly secured and tighten that down. So we've got our neutral wire secured, and now we're ready to connect these other wires. So I'm going to go ahead and secure the incoming hot wire, and then I'm going to secure the red load wire, and then last the ground wire. So we've got our hot wire down here, and we're just going to need to unfold this wire and make it straight so that we can connect it to this hot wire on the back of the Wemo dimmer. Now I've got my 2 hot wires, the hot wire on the Wemo dimmer and the hot wire in the junction box, so I'm just going to secure these together with this yellow wire nut. Those 2 wires are nice and secure, and now we're going to take our load wire and secure it to the load wire on the Wemo dimmer for installation. So once again, we're just going to need to straighten out this wire here so that we can secure it in a wire nut with the red wire the load wire from the Wemo Dimmer. And you might need to trim this load wire. You can put it up next to the one that you're going to wire with the switch, and if you want to use that as a guide, you can. So we're just going to trim a little bit off there, and then we're going to take our yellow wire connector and wire the load wire to the load wire on the Wemo Dimmer. Make sure that we get a nice secure wiring there and that those twist together. And next we're going to connect the ground wire on the Wemo Dimmer to the ground wire in the electrical switch box. So we're going to go ahead and just straighten this out again, this ground wire, and use a wire nut to connect it to the Wemo Dimmer so that we can install this. We take a yellow wire nut and just twist the two of these together. Now we have everything wired up for the Wemo Dimmer, and we are ready to install the Wemo Dimmer in the switch box. Now, in order to do this, you're going to want to take this cover plate off on the Wemo Dimmer. It just snaps in place, so we just unsnap it. Now what we're going to do is take our Wemo Dimmer and these wires and fold them back into the junction box gently. So I'm just going to get these folded in here, and then we're going to push our Wemo Dimmer down into the electrical box. So this takes a little bit of wire folding origami typically, and just make sure that you get them down in there. As you're folding the wires in, you want to make sure that none of the wires came undone or have any contact points where they could short something out. If you make sure that you do that, you are okay to put these wires back into the junction box, and now you're ready to install this Wemo Dimmer. So we folded everything into the junction box, and now we're just going to take these two screws and secure the Wemo Dimmer to the junction box. Now we have the Wemo Dimmer secured, and now we're going to take our cover plate and install it on the Wemo Dimmer. That just snaps into place, so just push hard on this and get it to snap in place, and we can see that the Wemo Dimmer switch is installed and secured. Now we're ready to start the power back up by going to the circuit breaker and turning the power back on at the circuit breaker. So I'm going to go do that. We can see that the Wemo Dimmer is lighting up and that it has power, and if I click right here, you will see that the light goes on with the Wemo Dimmer. So our Wemo Dimmer is now installed. Now on the Wemo Dimmer, you turn it on and off by pressing the switch. If you want to adjust the dimming levels, you can touch a touchpad here on the Wemo Dimmer, and that will change the brightness up or down. So I can just click here, or I can slide my finger up and down, and that changes the dimming level and brightness of the Wemo Dimmer. And then to turn it off, I just click here. So now we have our Wemo Dimmer installed, and we want to connect it to the Wemo app. Got another video that shows how to do that. If you want to skip ahead to that, you can just click on that link, or you can stay here and we'll show you how to connect the Wemo Dimmer to the Wemo app so that you can control the Wemo Dimmer from your phone. Now, in order to remotely control the Wemo Dimmer, you're going to need to add it to the Wemo app. So we've done that. You just need a username and password for the Wemo app, download it on the App Store, and then you go ahead and click plus in the upper right-hand corner. Up here, you select what kind of device you're connecting. We select the Wemo Dimmer here, and then it gives you instructions for installing the Wemo Dimmer. In order to connect the Wemo Dimmer to the Wemo app, what you're going to need to do is go to the Settings tab and click on your Wi-Fi network and select the Wemo Dimmer as the Wi-Fi network of choice. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. So you can see that I selected the Wemo Dimmer as the network that the phone is connected to, and now I'm going to go back to the Wemo app. Now the Wemo app connects to the dimmer, and I can choose a name for it. So I'm just going to call this one Study and click Next. Now it says what type of bulb are you using. So we're using an LED. We're going to go ahead and click on that and click Begin. It says, let's check your bulb. So I'm going to zoom out for this, and you can see what happens when you start checking it. The Wemo light switch turns on via the app, and it said, did your bulbs turn on at the lowest light level? Yes, they did. So we're going to say okay. And now we're going to let it test the dimming range here. It said, did your bulbs brighten up flicker free? Yes, they did. So we're going to go ahead and turn that off. Now I just connected Wemo to the Wi-Fi network that I'm using and entered my password. Now the Wemo Dimmer switch should be connected to the Wemo app, and I should have remote control here in just a moment. There we go, our Wemo switch showed up on the Wemo app. So now we can control the Wemo Dimmer from the app, and we can adjust the dimming level. So we can go to 100%, or we can go all the way down to something lower, 30%, and turn this off. Now, there's all kinds of features that you can use in the Wemo app. We've got another video on that, so I'll include those in the links below. But thank you for watching this video on how to install a Wemo dimmer. If you've got any questions, put them in the comment section or watch one of our other videos on Wemo. So there you have it. That is how you install a Wemo dimmer. Thank you for watching. Please give us that thumbs up. If you want to support us, subscribe and click any of the links below. Thank you.